Alright, let's talk about Pax Romana. I've been waist deep in this thing, sacrificing what little sleep I had left to the twin gods of trade and city planning. They slapped a toga on me, handed me a freshly minted scroll that read Governor, and basically said Rome wasn't built in a day, but we expect you to get a good chunk of it done before lunch. I'm usually the kind of strategy player who looks at an economy screen and immediately realizes I should have paid more attention in high school math. My previous attempts at empire building generally result in a smoldering pile of debt and angry citizens who haven't had bread in 3 days. So walking into the height of the Roman Empire, a time when things were supposedly all peace and neat togas, I was preparing for a glorious failure. But here's the thing. Pax Romana is like a perfectly woven Roman silk tunic, familiar in shape but incredibly smooth to the touch. It doesn't reinvent the colossal wheel the series has been rolling on for years. Instead, it polishes every single spoke until it gleams. The core loop is pure, uncut addiction, the kind of habit that makes you promise yourself just one more production chain at 2 AM only to realize the sun is now greeting you with aggressive morning light. You start with a few wobbly wooden shacks and a desperate need for fish, and before you know it, you're a megalomaniacal micromanager juggling the demand for purple dye on one island and figuring out why your Celtic citizens in the misty north are rioting over a lack of cheese on another. The beauty of this Anno is how accessible it feels without ever insulting your intelligence. It's taken the famously bloated rabbit hole filled menus of the genre and trimmed them down with a ruthless quill. Instead of being forced to wander through 9 separate sub-menus just to figure out how to make soap, you click on the required item and a delightful little flowchart pops up showing you exactly which buildings and resources you need. It's confrontationally straightforward, which is honestly the biggest quality of life upgrade I could have asked for. It transforms the early game from a stressful tax return simulator into the power fantasy we all showed up for. That being said, don't worry, the complexity eventually kicks in like a mule wearing Roman sandals. You'll spend hours agonizing over production ratios. If your grain farm takes 30 seconds and your porridge stand takes 30 seconds, you've hit the 1-to-1 sweet spot and life is good. But the minute a higher tier of citizens demands luxury goods, you're looking at chains that require 3 farms for every 2 processing plants, and suddenly my brain turns into that gif of the confused math lady. It requires you to lay out your cities like a hyper-efficient puzzle-solving lunatic, making sure every charcoal burner is just close enough to a warehouse but far enough away from the residential area so everyone doesn't pass out from the fumes. It's fiddly, it's frustrating, and when it works, it is deeply satisfying. The setting is where the game really stretches its legs. We're in 117 AD, which means we get to play in 2 distinct regions: Latium, the sun-kissed idyllic Mediterranean heartland, and Albion, the glooming, misty, bog-ridden Celtic provinces. Latium is all wide beaches, aqueducts, and the smell of fresh marble, perfect for building a pristine, geometrically perfect Roman metropolis. Albion though, that's where the fun starts. It feels appropriately alien, a land of marsh and scrub that no self-respecting centurion would ever want to be posted to. Building here means wrestling with soggy mire, laying down timber boardwalks just to get your eel catches operational, and trying to keep your wood supply from collapsing entirely. The visual contrast is stunning, going from the bright Mediterranean sunlight to the dark, mossy evergreen forests of the north feels like stepping into a different game entirely. This contrast also largely influences your political choices as governor. When your citizens upgrade, you have to decide whether they become Romano-Celts, fully embracing Roman life with their demand for imperial cuisine and hand mirrors, or if they maintain their native Celtic culture, demanding things like local cheese and fancy bracelets. This is a brilliant idea in theory, as it forces you to run 2 completely separate economies in parallel. You have to decide if you want to drain the marshes to build a proper Roman grid, or if you'll stick to the ancient ways and build around the wetlands. However, and this is where I sound like a grumpy old centurion, these massive cultural decisions often feel less like world-shaping moments and more like flipping a switch on the production line. The game keeps telling you that your choices shape the destiny of your provinces, but the emotional connection rarely settles in. You're presented with a high-stake choice and then you just get different demand meters to fill. It's a mechanic that politely nods at your moral compass, but doesn't actually transform your experience in a dramatically memorable way. And that lack of ambition is frustrating, because the setting deserves more punch. This lack of narrative weight extends to the campaign. If you're looking for a sprawling, epic narrative worthy of a place in Caesar's archives, you won't find it here. The campaign is, to put it mildly, perfunctory. It serves as an extended, slightly shallow tutorial wrapped in a bit of plot about navigating the Emperor's demands and dealing with renegade tribes. It's fine. It introduces the systems gently, but the sandbox mode is where this game truly lives and breathes. The minor character-driven stories you encounter feel more like a distraction from the real purpose of the game, making beautiful, ridiculously complicated cities. The combat is back, both naval and land-based. It's simple, employing a basic rock-paper-scissors approach that will be familiar to anyone who's glanced at a strategy game before. It's optional, thankfully. I've always preferred to choke my rivals with mountains of olive oil and linen rather than send in a fleet of ancient warships, and the game fully supports a diplomatic, economic victory. If you engage, don't expect total war level depth. It's clunky and unsatisfying, feeling more like a necessary function check than a genuinely engaging system. Visually, the game is stunning. Seriously, the level of detail is almost absurd. Zooming in, you see kids chasing dogs through the streets, vendors shouting, and crowds cheering in the arena. Everything feels carefully placed, alive, and filled with artistry. The lighting, textures, and use of ray tracing technology for reflections create a breathtaking atmosphere. My experience running the game was fantastically smooth, holding a solid frame rate even as my population swelled and the screens was filled with thousands of bustling citizens. There are minor bugs, like a texture popping here, a citizen clipping there, but nothing that caused a crash or a truly frustrating experience. The polish here is immediately clear. The only real blight on the technical experience is, once again, the user interface, but specifically when dealing with the bigger picture. For a game so focused on inter-island trade and complex resource tracking, the high-level UI is annoyingly skimpy. While setting up a single bread factory is a breeze thanks to those fantastic in-menu flowcharts, trying to track exactly how many resources are flowing between Latium and Albion, or even just checking your total resource stock for entire region becomes a puzzling mess. You have to click and scroll far too much to find crucial information that should be front and center. It's like searching for a specific grain of sand in the Colosseum, and that vital inter-regional trade data is often hidden in a sub-menu buried 3 layers deep. It's an odd choice for a game that otherwise streamlines so much of the production management loop. It gives you a brilliant microscope for local issues, but a terrible telescope for imperial oversight. The biggest caveat, and one you need to weigh, is content. While this version of the Anno formula is arguably the most polished and best starting point the series has ever delivered, it feels noticeably less dense than its predecessor, which benefited from years of expansions. You get the distinct impression that some of the more interesting aspects of the Roman setting have been carefully reserved for post-launch content. Is Anno 117 Pax Romana worthy? Absolutely. It's the best entry point for newcomers, and it provides enough clever refinements and a gorgeous setting to hook the veterans. While the campaign is essentially just a long, boring tutorial, the sandbox is a magnificent time sink. This game strips away much of the system's bloat and focuses ruthlessly on the satisfying, addictive core loop of building, expanding, and managing. You're guaranteed dozens if not hundreds of hours of highly polished, highly engaging city building goodness. Yes, the narrative choices are mostly fluff, the combat is forgettable, and the UI is a confusing mess once you zoom out to imperial oversight, but none of these flaws are enough to break the pure joy of watching your tiny, messy settlements slowly grow into a marble-clad jewel of the empire. The game perfects the micromanagement loop, and that's what truly counts. If you ever wanted to play a beautiful city builder that feels less like work and more like an achievement, then grab your sandals. The cost of peace is yours to decide, but the cost of your free time is guaranteed. I'm already mentally preparing for my next city layout, and I have a feeling I won't be seeing my bed for a week.